Me too. So I got a few announcements to make before we get too deep into the artwork. First of all, on Wednesday, you've seen the calendar, the course schedule, quiz 1. And how I'm going to do this is that I'm going to put it on Zoom Wednesday morning-ish. And so you guys have some time to look at it and maybe even start to answer the question if you like, but I'll give you a little preview. When we come in on Wednesday, I'll open this up and explain exactly what I mean by the questions I ask in that quiz. It's open book, open source. And so I haven't quite figured out how to phrase the question, but it's basically going to involve one or two of the artworks that we've seen on the PowerPoints. And of course, they're in the textbook. And this is chapter 1, illustration 12. Easy to get to. And you can get from there all of the other information, the artist, the title, the date, the medium. And so anyway, there'll be about 1 or 2 questions or 1 or 2 slides from this course, and we'll talk about it. And I want to make sure that by the time we leave on Wednesday, that you'll have a real clear picture of what I'm asking for. David.
By Wednesday, do you mean Thursday?
Today's Monday, right?
Yeah. Oh, wait, never mind. I got this class mixed up with another class.
Hey, you had me going.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But yeah, and it'll be due Monday morning. So you'll have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, 5 days. And that should take care of some of you have accommodations that you need extra time. So I build in a lot of time for this. And so if there are any other accommodations or something that you have that I've missed, please let me know. Because I'd like to do everything I can to enable your success. And cool. And then after that, let me see, what else did I want to say? Course evaluations. 3-week course evaluations are on Canvas right now. You can get to them. We take evaluations seriously. Fill it out, and you should probably think about filling them out for all your classes, but it's an important part of what we do here. And so I'd sure appreciate it if they're anonymous. It's not like Amazon. If you click on something, then you get all this other stuff. It's just truly anonymous. So, no questions on that stuff. Let's talk about the Renaissance. And what we're talking about here is the 15th century, 1400 to 1500. And the Quattrocento in Italy, that's just the name for the 15th century, the 1400s. And so anyway, that's where we're at. That's where we left off. And I want to kind of go back a little bit about some of the things we talked about to this point. And right now we're looking at Italian sculpture, Southern Renaissance, and we looked at some sculpture from the Northern Renaissance. And I think there's a couple of things that really stand out. And one of them is that they still in the North approach sculpture as something that's somewhere between two-dimensional and three-dimensional. It's always part of something. It's part of an altarpiece. It's part of a column. It's part of an entry portal. It's the same idea about sculpture that was dominant, prevalent during the Gothic era. And when we go to Italy, we start to see a freestanding sculpture, sculpture in the round. That's one big difference. Another big difference is this, and it's where we ended up last week on Wednesday. We talked about the nude being part of Italian sculpture. It would not do that in Northern Renaissance. And they were still basically very conservative. And what we see here is really kind of the beginnings of what will be in the early 16th century, the Protestant Reformation. Anybody know what the Protestant Reformation is? Martin Luther, 1520. Anybody heard of Lutherans? Yeah, that's kind of the big breakaway Protestant Christianity. And here's what happened. For this 1,500, 400 years, Christianity had had kind of a turbulent past. At first, it was illegal, and it was an underground religion. And it was basically centered in what was then Roman Empire, and the Romans outlawed Christianity, and they found Christians, they beat them to the lions inside the Colosseum. And then in the early 4th century, we have Emperor Constantine, and he converts to Christianity, and he makes Christianity the predominant religion, the state official religion of the Roman Empire. Went from being outlawed to being part of the establishment. And so late in that millennia, we have in the 11th century, we have what they call the Great Schism. And that is that the people that practiced Christianity in the East, which was Greece, Turkey, a lot of places all through the Middle East and in Eastern Europe. Bottom line, my ears are ringing. What's up with that? Oh.
It just kept going on.
I got it. So we have this split, the Great Schism. I don't know if you guys heard of this, Eastern Orthodox Christianity, Eastern Orthodox Catholic, Roman Catholic, they split. And so went right into news right now is the Ukraine. And they're talking about all of the Russian influence and there might be a war and all this stuff. But if you see the pictures of Kiev, capital of Ukraine, you'll see a lot of cathedrals and churches. And they are of the Eastern Orthodox faith. sometimes called the Greek Orthodox faith. Not to belabor that, we have the Roman Catholic Church having the monopoly on Christianity in Europe, in Western Europe, and that's really what we're looking at here. But by the time we get to the 15th century, we start to see the cultures diverge. What we see is that in the North, they are, if in modern terms, you would say they were much more conservative. And you would say that the Roman Church was much more liberal. And what I mean by that, they didn't have Medicaid or anything like that. Not that kind of liberal, but they were more open to some of the ideas of ancient Greece and Rome. And so when we talk about nudity, for instance, in art, in the Italian peninsula, in the Catholic Church, that's just fine. That's just fine because our ancestors have been doing this for 1,500, 1,800 years. In the North, they don't like this. They keep their clothes on. They don't believe in any of this stuff that the Italians are all about. They said that's pagan. All of this pre-Christian stuff was wrong. And so we have kind of two basic sets of values emerging. And so the competition is really kind of interesting. In the North, it ends up being Protestant in the 16th century, and the Catholics keep hold of Spain, Portugal, Italy, and so on. Well, how does that affect everything? Well, you see, about early American history. See, the Spanish, the Portuguese, they come over and colonize the New World. They get all of South America and a pretty good chunk of North America. And they bring Roman Catholicism with them, as do some of the French. The French are kind of divided. They have some Protestant, they have some Catholics, but mostly Catholics. So that's why we have, say, St. Louis, named after a Roman Catholic saint, a king of France. And so all of these places, especially when you go out west, San Francisco, Spanish for St. Francis, Los Angeles, the Angels, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, we got two rival systems going. We got the Protestants, we got the Catholics, and it comes out in the art, because you can really tell what a culture is about through their art.
Cool. He just talks about.
And so
You're in art class, aren't you?
that's where I want to begin.
You might need to know these. I'm not going to be able to help you.
I don't need to know all these.
I'm not going to be able to help you.
Andrea del Verrocchio.
No,
David
because
from
I just looked up this shit.
Basil del Signore,
Dude, this is the second part of it.
mid 15th century
Look at first semester.
bronze.
Freshman year, I aced
He's
it.
got his clothes on.
I did take it.
I want to bring this up.
Look at my
because
spare
this is,
key.
So
Under your shoe.
crucial to understanding what this is. You were to see this,
I like
we already saw David before with his hat, his sword, and no clothes. But we got this guy here. He's more dressed like a young warrior,
Make you sleep.
right now.
still barefoot, but you know,
No, I would have brought
got
my.
some kind of sandals.
Oh, it's okay. It's whatever.
What is this? What adjectives would you use to describe
Out
this
here.
figure?
It's fine. It's not like I have a 50% in this class just because of attendance. I wasn't
Young.
here
Very young.
Mondays
And
ago.
that's important. That's important to the message that these artists wanted to portray because they were emerging out of the dark ages. And we talked about Renaissance meaning rebirth. And it's really about, it is a youth movement. It's young, it's new. If you know about the politics of the time, we know that like in England and in France and in Spain, they have a central king and queen, a monarch. In Italy, not so much. They have the Pope in Rome, but their government is still basically the same way it was 1,000 or 1,500 years ago. And that is, it was organized by city states. So if you were a city, you had your own government, you built a wall around it, had your own army. And Florence, really, really prosperous city-state. Not coincidentally, they had money to train, develop,
Telling myself
subsidize, patronize.
Otherwise, I'm not getting anything done during the week.
And so you see all of this art flourish. And one thing that the Florentines like to do is to celebrate their emergence into power.
You come to see if
David is a symbol for that. And because they had a lot of money, there were barbarian peoples of all kinds trying to ransack Florence. They would come under siege regularly. And people would want to come in and loot Florence. They want to get their gold, their treasures, whatever they had. Florence survived because they were smarter. So how does that fit with David? Well, David was smarter. He was smarter than Goliath. Goliath could have crushed him with his bare hands, but no, David had a sling and a sword. He knocked him out with the sling, and cut his head off with a sword. And there he is, triumphant, cocky. And they saw, the Florentines, that is, they saw themselves as being that way. The little engine that could. The city-state that was small but mighty. And smart. And so you'll see a lot of Davids. This is the second one I've shown you. This will persist. We'll probably see the last one, maybe later today, maybe Wednesday. The Michelangelo David. Michelangelo was a Florentine. He was trained, he got his artistic training in Florence. And that's where he was established as an artist. He identified as Florentine, but the Pope brought him down to Rome. Rest is art history. But at any rate, one of the things that Florentines do, and this is kind of evidence of how smart they are, they really studied anatomy. And this kind of weight shifting that you see here, that's a pretty difficult thing to do if you're doing sculpture. And I'll back up a little bit, and we see that here with Donatello. And you don't see that in the North quite so much. They don't really know how to do that. That's called contrapposto, weight shift. And so this is Del Verrocchio and this is David, and this is what the Florentines were all about. And they made the best of it. And so Antonio del Ola, Oya, Olo. Easy for you to say.
Let's keep doing
Hercules
Vegas.
and
Yeah, I'm
Antithesis.
close enough. Vegas.
Whoa,
Was that mine?
I was talking
learn
about
it.
paganism. Whoa, this is
Sinner.
right out of Greek mythology. It was okay. It wasn't sinful. And in fact, they embraced it. And again, Florence. And again, here's just yet another great sculptor from Florence. And so the lifelike qualities,
Does
the
this look
idea
interesting?
of actually figuring out which muscles
What if you're called?
should be tense and which should be lax. It's
He
an
literally-
anatomy class when you see this. This is
That's all. He's
incredibly
look. Let me pin him.
accurate. And so,
It's comfy.
moving on, this is an interesting sculpture.
Only
too.
to talk.
And this is terracotta, which is clay. It's pottery, and it's on the exterior wall or San Michele in Florence. And there's a reason why this is in here. It is famous, to be sure. But they're also doing some things with religious iconography that the northern artist would not touch, would not even come close to. And that is that they would, when they did something, tackle a subject like the Madonna and Child, the Virgin Mary, and the baby Jesus.
I need to charge my phone. That I did
When
bring
they
a charger.
tackle this subject,
My phone is dead.
Mary's actually beautiful.
Oh, mine's $20.
They don't really accentuate
Vegas.
that in the north.
Yeah, therefore
there's
it
your
is better.
problem.
Mine's kind of
Therefore
looks
it's
very
better.
pious, to be sure.
Can I plug my phone
And the
in
other thing
to
is
that
that the
to this
baby
thing and then into my phone? And then
looks like an
this way?
infant.
Oh, no.
That's something they don't do in the north as well. They try to kind of give you some clues that this, because it's Christ,
Or it's battery packs for
he's
50.
extraordinary. And he's a little different than
It'll
most.
charge very fast.
And he's
yes.
got this
Yes,
kind
like
of look that he knows
Why?
what's in store. He knows that it's been prophesied that he would come and absolve
I downloaded it for
I
the
think I bought
plane.
that.
humankind
I did too.
for
but
original sin,
I have a
that he
different
would die
I started playing
for
it
our sins. Anyway, I'm
while I was
going
on the
kind of
plane.
deep into the Christianity, but
That's not on the verse.
the idea being that Christ never was fully an innocent child. And here, they're more willing to
Which one's your favorite level?
marry beautiful and Christ
Mine is jumper.
innocent.
I'm the worst at
Innocent
it.
I
child.
will download that game just for shits and giggles right now.
And
But I'm
so,
listening to reading your
more
book.
sculpture.
Is it an interesting book?
This is kind of an interesting thing too, because we're starting to see rich
It was me in the
people
plane. Every time I died, I
get treated
turned my phone off
like
because I couldn't get mad because I was by people
And
I didn't know.
so if you had enough money,
'Cause we were C group, so there's nobody.
you could be buried
no-
in a mausoleum.
Yeah,
And
You're way there. You got the A group, and
something
Brianna
like
was so
this to
excited about that.
memorialize your
you know
life.
what we got for our original flight? We were A
Um,
and B group.
A and B, even B is good.
I know.
You had to have money and you had to be, how should I
Hey, but I
say?
did get a
This
trophy.
is something that comes from pre-Christian
That's all I could say
times
that came
too.
out of this.
We
Geometry
take a
dash.
look at what was going on in Eritrean, pre-Roman culture. They
Oh
did
my God.
sarcophagi
This game's not
in
been
a big
updated.
way. and
No.
put
It's the same.
Right, but I'm saying
the
like,
image of the deceased on top of the
Yes, give me a warning.
sarcophagus. This is in a lot of ways,
been
it's
a
not
while.
really unlike what
It's
you
the
would
exact
see in
same.
the
There's
tomb
no-
of
Did you
Tut.
get the light version?
no, I got the full version.
where his likeness would be sculpted on the top of the crypt. And so anyway, we have a lot of things changing here. Equestrian statue, and again,
Epic. I beat this game. Until we level the first time.
in Italy,
You're not
but
After not playing it in years.
they had
Oh, there's
the idea to glorify some of their military people as well.
new
It blew my
best.
mind that had
Of course, they
people that
depended
had
on. They were city states.
called,
They had to
the-
have
on there.
defense,
sorry.
and so
Keep in mind
anyway,
the people that
and
had
you
like
can see
hundreds
again,
and
they
hundreds of
had developed
attempts.
sculpture to it, almost back to its
What do you mean have
former
hundreds and hundreds of
like it says
attempts?
attempt 1 or attempt
sculpture
2.
that you would have seen.
Yeah, but that goes
Yeah.
away after
in Rome.
you
Rocket.
exit out of
Does
the
it really?
level.
Oh,
Again,
Yeah.
another Del Verrocchio. He's the guy
Rocket.
that
Oh. That one.
we just saw.
No, because I'm trying to play these hard
Um,
ones, and then I go back
so
to the easier ones. I'm like,
that's
this is slow.
Sculpture painting takes
Does
it
it-
another
Yeah,
I have a
different
problem
just
is that
start
I always like
too.
going out when I'm playing the game.
And
This
see, this
game,
is
yeah.
early in the 15th century, 1423.
No, I got
And what we have
63%.
here, this is called the international style.
What level do you want me to try?
And in
I'm-
painting. it
you wanna
wasn't
start at the
such a
same time
clean
as you?
break.
Yeah.
Hold on. Let me die.
What level are you on? I think I got all of them.
I'm on base after
I think I got the
base.
first 3
They
levels.
did a lot of things
You
that
on?
were
Base after base.
right out of Byzantine art.
I remember playing this in middle
That's why it's
school.
called the international style.
Base after base.
And you can see it's a lot of gold leaf, a lot of
I'm about to
ornate
beat it.
wood,
You
You're
better
probably
catch up.
carving,
Better catch up.
very busy,
I just got a coin too.
not
Bitch.
particularly lifelike,
Mm-mm.
although it's
Oh,
lifelike
fuck.
enough that you know what the figures are,
Aren't
but
you
it's
dying?
really about a lot of
Yeah, I'm upside
symbolism
down right
and
now.
so on.
Come
And
on,
there-
come on, we're
that
almost
was
there.
called the Adoration of the
Okay, I
Magi.
just have that. Oh, that's
And
fine.
here they are, 1, 2, 3.
The
These are
circle?
the 3 kings
Yeah.
bringing their gifts
Oh my-
to the emperor.
No, it just got 97%.
How? Why? Because he was born.
Oh,
Sorry.
battery pack woman.
Your
I think it was
life.
like $50 years and years
And so
ago. It's
anyway,
also massive.
this is where they started out.
Is it still charging?
Really
I was small
steeped
for you to do our
in
first, and she said, I
tradition,
have work.
really
your phone
steeped
still
in
charging?
Byzantine
I'm
art,
checking, I couldn't.
but they move. They move quickly
It's
out of that
okay.
I'm gonna beat you if you don't keep playing.
into
I just got
what
97%.
we
I
know
just
the
put my phone real
Renaissance
quick
for.
and
We
then
know
go
the
back.
Renaissance
God, I'm
Or-
like, so pissed off at this game.
advanced.
Wait, I need to turn the
advancements
music
in
on. Hold on.
Realism
Hearing is off.
in
Oh, that's
verisimilitude. Take you back to David Hockney. He said, there was this, we put all of our pictures up on the wall in chronological order, and we saw that
Bothering you?
1400.
And distract you.
Everything after that was much more real, gradually became more real.
I know what game you're playing.
But in short order, he said, how did that
But-
happen? Did they all of a sudden
know.
learn how to draw?
Is it
I think so.
like one where
But
you had to tap
in
whenever
some
like
ways,
the
they
beat
really
hit or
did.
something?
Yeah, that's
They
exactly
just learned how
Oh,
to
fuck, I turned my-
use
Ooh, wow, my
tools
screen stopped working. My hands are
what
sweaty.
they wanted. And in this case, the
Hold on, let me find
Italians
it.
Like my
really
screen.
relied
I touch it,
more on mathematics,
cracked to hell, so it's very awesome.
linear perspective, and scientific method.
Was
Oh,
it
I
like a
don't have
block
the-
game? 'Cause that's the one. Mine is dancing line. This shit was so fun.
I thought I had.
That's what I
the
played.
Linear.
I don't know if that's the one you're
perspective
talking about.
slide.
Oh, no, it's the one where
Let
you
me
like
tell you about it.
swipe-
where you
It's not
swipe the
that
ball.
hard to
The
see.
ball.
Yeah, the ball.
Is it the
What you have
sky?
here
Yes.
is a horizon line that runs
Really?
right here, right through where my cursor is. There's the horizon
I do not
line.
have the coordination for this. Like,
And the vanishing point is right
Was
there,
a tile top? But that looks
right on Jesus.
definitely like sky or something.
Yeah.
This is
I know.
1 point perspective.
How am I supposed to
And
do
if
that?
you trace this down,
Where you want
all
to
of these lines, more or less, it's not
Oh.
perfect, but they converge
I'm very distracted.
on Jesus. And that is 1 point perspective with a whole lot of symbolism built in. Because
I'm so upset. Did they get rid of it? I can't
everything
find it.
does converge on Jesus.
Yep.
Everything
It was
points.
by like
to
catch app
Jesus.
studios.
That is, he is.
Rolling Sky.
Yeah, that's what it
The
is.
subject,
Oh, that shit was so
The person-
fun.
the God we worship.
I'll show you the
That long
game.
ago.
And so anyway, this
I'll show you the
is
game I
called the
was talking
tribute
about.
money, and it's in the Brancachi Chapel.
Yeah, but that game had like popular songs and everything.
Yeah.
How many of you guys how many of you ever heard this
Oh,
saying?
I got 41%. I'm getting
From
100. I
Jesus.
don't know what you're saying.
Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Render unto God what is God's.
Free trial.
For what?
Let me tell you what that means.
No.
This is a story
Wait,
about
Why do you say no so innocently?
that
Like, why do you
part
listen?
of the gospel, that gospel story.
What?
And
Saying I have 8%.
I'll walk you through
Free
it.
trial.
This guy right here
Okay. So
with the blue top.
and it's like this.
Brianna, I'm playing a game.
She don't.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi, B. Schmidt.
That's Saint Peter. He is the lead apostle.
Lying ass.
I was reading a
He
book.
is the
Now,
leader
now,
of
now
the
it's yelling at
apostles.
beings, lying ass.
And here he is,
Disrupted me and now it's making me
by
play video games with her.
Lake
Thank you.
Galilee,
we're
and
the
he finds
I
a
know.
fish
We have
with a
relaxed.
coin in its mouth.
Oh,
Whoa,
what's the vibe today?
hit the lottery. Lucky Peter. Well, so
Or-
Peter thinks he's gonna
or-
keep this money, but this guy right here,
Like later,
Young
later,
guy.
again here? Oh, I guess it's only 5:30. Okay.
he is the Roman
Oh,
tax collector. And he says, you found that coin, I'm here
Okay.
to collect it because you gotta pay
No.
your tax.
Fuck.
So,
Will you get if
Natalie,
I
tell me, when's your birthday?
It'll
Oh,
be familiar. You guys make a lot of money.
Guess
you'll
the
have to pay a lot of
month.
taxes. Bottom line, that's what he's there for. And in the center, again, like I say, here's Jesus. So this is a sequence. This is almost like a graphic novel. You take this part, scene 1, the center, scene 2, over here, scene 3. This is Peter. He said, I found this. This coin came from a fish. It's mine. And Jesus, the famous words I just said, just spoke. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, because he tells Peter, give me that coin. Whose head, whose face is on this coin? Caesar's. Good. Give it to the tax collector. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. We know it's his money. It's got his face on it. And here it is, the final scene. St. Peter handing it over. And so this is clearly one of the best examples of how they used art, and especially in Italy, and especially at this time, to tell stories about Jesus and the Bible and Christianity. And so it's the tribute money. It's a mural. It's actually quite large. It's 8 feet, 4 inches high and almost 20 feet wide. And if you saw the whole David Hockney film, I think they actually show you this here. But at any rate, this is all, the space is believable, and it's done with 1-point perspective, which is a mathematical solution to the problem of creating the illusion of space on a flat surface. And here's some more Masaccio, and he is like really the big guy, early 15th century, who develops 1-point perspective. And so here we are, the angel casting Adam and Eve out of paradise, from expulsion from Eden. And again, don't mind showing nudity. This was something in the north, even if they were talking about Adam and Eve, and obviously they were not clothed. It actually says that in the story in Genesis. They would put a fig leaf or something strategically placed, but not these guys, because they were of a tradition. And so here's another Masaccio, Santa Maria Novella. And this is the Holy Trinity, which I'm going to show you this. What we have is the crucified Christ and God the Father over this. Mary, John the Apostle, and these two figures. Those two figures are donors. I showed you that with the Robert Campion Baroque altar piece. We saw the donors. So in some ways, they're kind of the same. I'd like you to think about Northern Renaissance and Italian Renaissance this way. It's kind of like Android or iPhone. They are two competing systems. They are very different, and in a lot of ways, they're very much the same. And you'll have adherents. Now, we talk about people that just love Northern Renaissance. Back when I was your age, that wasn't quite the case. They called, as Hockney said one point in that film, the Northern painters were considered to be primitives because they didn't do one-point perspective. However, he proved that they were actually at least the equal of the Southern Renaissance painters. So anyway, this guy, Fra Angelico, Fra, that refers to what this guy was in everything as we see. Just check. Fra, he's a friar, he's a monk, he's and it has Angelico. Which refers to the fact that he is a painter of angels. And he still paints in a way that's kind of like Byzantine art. And it's kind of flattened out and everything. It doesn't have the depth and breadth and kind of realism that we see in Northern Renaissance. But he paints magnificent angels. And you can always tell a Fra Angelico by the elaborate wings on these angels. And so this space here, you know, it's one-point perspective. It's not that believable. But Fra Angelico, Castagno, excuse me. Last Supper. We'll see a lot of Last Suppers in the Renaissance. Favorite theme. There's Jesus. And this guy is on the other side of the table. Judas. He's not with the other 11 apostles. And so he's actually separated. But this is a pretty good story, or it's a pretty good example of one-point perspective. And that perspective, again, leads to Jesus, the central figure in all of these artworks. Uccello, another step along the development of perspective. He was a guy who was kind of a mathematician and kind of figured all of his paintings out based on geometry. The Battle of San Romano. Again, military figures, they were city states, they had to defend themselves against invaders all of the time. And Fra Angelico's contemporary, Fra Filippo Lippi. Madonna and Child with Angels. Again, a beautiful Mary and a child like Jesus, and this angel, look at this angel, just kind of playfully looking back at us, kind of having a little fun there with his place in Christianity. And so anyway, this is Fra Filippo Lippi. I'm going to go off script here a little bit. Art history, as we know it, began in the 16th century with a guy who wrote about the famous artists, painters, sculptors, and architects. And in that book, it was a big coffee table volume, and it told the stories of the lives of these people who made all of this art. And so it's really kind of a people magazine. And Fra Lippi, actually, this woman here was a nun. Fra Lippi was a monk, and they had an affair, and they really believed that this was their child, and so on. Masaccio, I showed you the tribute money. He was a wild man. He was a drunken lunatic. He was a rabble rouser. He was very ill behaved. So anyway, we know a lot about all of these people, just saying. Piero della Francesca, Resurrection. What this depicts, Easter Sunday, the first Easter. The story, as told in the Bible, is that Christ was buried and that Herod actually put some soldiers out in front of the tomb to make sure that nobody would come and get Christ's body. The soldiers fell asleep and Christ rose from the dead. On the third day, he rose from the dead. It's part of the Nicene Creed. Big part of Christianity. And there he is, resurrected, has his wounds on the hands, on the side, and the soldiers are asleep, and he just walks away. There's something kind of interesting about this, I think, and that is that these soldiers are depicted as 15th century Italian soldiers. They don't look like Roman soldiers at all. And so when you're making artwork to tell a story, sometimes you use a little bit of artistic license so that people would know that these are soldiers in front of the tomb. Not necessarily historically accurate, but in terms of telling the story. Again, the question I've been asking a lot in this class. What did the artist want to do, and how well did he or she do it? Piero della Francesca, another big, huge one-point perspective. I want to point this one out, though, too. Here we got the flagellation. This is before Christ is actually crucified. They beat him with a whip. And so they have this linear perspective that dictates the patterning on the floor, the placement of the figures and so on. But look at the scale. These are three contemporary, ordinary Florentines. Okay, people of means, people of education, people in high fashion. But the flagellation is occurring and it's only a real small part of this painting. So we got something happening here. I showed you the donors being on the sides. In this case, they're like the biggest part of the picture. The flagellation of Christ, and they have this sort of pseudo Roman figure in gold on the Roman column, and here's the guy with the whip and so on. But if you take this is 1 point perspective, just like they always do this. Another fine example, 1 point perspective, birth of the Virgin. And this is when Mary was born. And so this is more than likely not the kind of trappings that Mary was born into, this palace, if you will. But this is fashionable as well. We saw in the Hockney film, he showed you some good examples of like the Man in the Red Turban by Jan van Eyck and how they did that. And you see that in that portrait by Van Eyck, the subject is kind of put into 3/4 view. You can see both of his eyes. One of the things that happens in the South is that they do profile portraits. This is very stylish. It's the way artists do things. There was a little bit of philosophy beliefs that you could tell what a person's personality was like by looking at their profile. But at any rate, this is distinctly different. We saw the Roger van der Weyden young girl with her hands sort of crossed in front, portrait of a young lady. This is the same kind of subject, but handled in an entirely different way. So this is the Italian Renaissance. They do things differently. And as we get to this, Botticelli, a lot of people start to talk, and some historians, I should say, consider this to be the beginning of the High Renaissance. And they'll put Botticelli in there with Leonardo and Raphael and Michelangelo. Bottom line is that what we have here, Primavera, spring, and we have something of what you might consider to be a pagan subject matter. In fact, Botticelli embraced pre-Christian mythology and kind of move to this. This is another Botticelli. This is one that won. I forgot who said they liked this. Yeah. So we will get to this too. Yeah, this is Botticelli, and you see it's almost in the 16th century, late 15th century. And what he has here, this is a Roman goddess, the goddess of beauty and love. And what she has is her attendants here, and we have these figures. These are the winds that blow. And it's right out of Greek mythology. And again, we're talking about nudity, full frontal nudity, because she's actually somewhat modest and kind of covering herself. But this is pre-Christian. And this is like, as far as the people practicing Catholicism in Northern Europe, this is like way over the top. This is pagan. And this is the kind of art and the kind of belief that really puts the two competing cultures at odds. Like I said, the Android versus the iPhone. It's really, and they both do things very well, and their priorities are different. And this is Perugino, Christ delivering the keys of the kingdom to St. Peter. And this, you can't get a better look at 1 point perspective. There's Christ, there's St. Peter, there are the keys. And in Christian beliefs, in Catholic beliefs, St. Peter is the gatekeeper to heaven. And it's not really talked about so much. It's not part of the popular culture, but anymore, but that was the thing. That was what was believed for many centuries, that St. Peter kept the ledger. And when you died, you saw St. Peter. If you were good, he would let you in. If not, you wouldn't. And so this is what we have. This is it. A couple of other things that they do in the Italian Renaissance too, because they could figure all of this stuff out with perspective, with geometry. They really go out and they start inventing buildings. These buildings and these archways, they don't really exist. This is just built from the laws of perspective. And another thing that they like to do were these Renaissance trees. They don't resemble much of anything in the natural world. And they barely resemble anything of kind of sculpted horticultural flora. And so anyway, they do this. These are really symbolic trees. And so they have the means. They can invent reality. That's another big indicator of Italian Renaissance. A while ago, this is Piero della Francesca, and here is that profile, the Duke of Urbino and his wife. In profile, this is how they, and an invented landscape. 1 point perspective, della Francesca. And so I want to put this out there. Mantegna, ceiling of the camera picta, painted chamber. Camera means room, as I was saying. And this guy who commissioned Mantegna had Mantegna paint this on the ceiling in their bedroom. And he got married to this woman who was very modest, and he kind of did this to play a practical joke on her, that they had all of these figures that were looking down on what they were doing. It was kind of embarrassing to say the least. But, and again, there's another issue here. Mantegna, he was like really good at manipulating. It was hard to do 1 point perspective when you're looking up. Things get really distorted. But he was figuring this out, and he figured this out too. This is St. James being led to martyrdom. And what Mantegna has done with this is put us at this level. And if you can manipulate perspective, you can place the viewer wherever you like. And so here is St. James being led to martyrdom. Here is his jail keeper. This is the jailer right here, begging St. James for forgiveness. And we are here, as I drew this scribble here, this is where we are, and we're actually looking up at St. James as well. Again, you know perspective, you know the mathematics, the geometry, you can make these archways and everything. It's what they did. And so this, probably the most famous Mantegna. And we have the foreshortened Christ, lamentation over the dead Christ. And we have two women weeping here. And we have Christ with his open wounds, blood drained, blood all over the place. And so when you have the ability to do realism, how do you use it? And so I'm going to kind of run through this pretty quickly here. Battle of the 10 Nudes. This kind of comes out of Greek mythology too. What we have is the emergence of printmaking, engraving. And again, as I was saying, we have the invention of the printing press. And then alongside that, we have artists making prints to accompany the printed books that are much easier and much more readily available. But this, look at this, this is right out of mythology. This is nothing at all Christian about this. And so we have that. We're going to talk a lot more about printmaking in the North, where it really takes on significance. But Brunelleschi is the guy we started this chapter with. And he was a sculptor, turned his attention to architecture. In Florence, they had this cathedral, Santa Maria del Fiore, and it was designed to have a dome on it, but they got to this point where they didn't know how to make a dome. So it's sat open, crazy as it sounds, but it had stayed open. They found a guy that knew the mathematics enough that he actually built this dome. We're still trying to figure out how he did that. There are researchers in Florence, and they have come up with various theories on how he made this dome. And it's a little different than the domes of antiquity. It's called a ribbed dome, which means that you have these support beams embedded in here. But just the engineering, just the mathematics, just the architectural skills it took, we're still trying to figure that out. But at any rate, if you ever see a picture of Florence, they'll always show the Florence Cathedral with the dome. And here it is, there's a cutaway view. And it kind of shows you what they did. We're still trying to figure out how. And what they do in architecture is really kind of different than what we see in other places too. Mathematics. Mathematics really drives much of what the Italians do. Their paintings are all laid out in mathematical, geometric perspective. their buildings are put together, not so much with ornamentation, although there is some of that, but it's usually a mathematical principle that these columns are as far apart as they are high. They create a perfect square. The archways are a perfect semicircle. They place the windows centered on the archways below. See? And this is, again, a nod to Greek and Roman culture, because the Greeks were like that. And what they were doing at the time, they were getting a lot of the textbooks and the notebooks and some of the other artifacts from Greece and ancient Rome. And they were trying to be like ancient Greece and Rome. Say that. They were doing nudes. They were doing things like Venus by Botticelli. Doing a nude David. They were using the tribute money, all mathematically based. Uccello, all of these people. And again, the mathematics determines what this looks like. And again, Brunelleschi, architect. And they get back to some of the old theories that the building should be shaped like a cross because it's a Christian place of worship. Brunelleschi, again, mathematical precision, not a lot of ornamentation, but it's all a mathematical proposition. Centered, archways, squares, half circles. Again, Alberti, another great Alberti. This is going to be the last thing I show you about the Italian Renaissance for a while. But this is a church, a cathedral, if you will. And those of you who had the other class, the ADAH 100, know about Gothic cathedrals, the Cathedral of Notre Dame, and all of these other places that were just so ornate, so well decorated with sculpture. They were very complex. By comparison, we got this, and there's hardly any indication here that this is actually a church. We got a little bit of Latin going on here, but this is all geometry. Geometry rules the day. It is what the Italian Renaissance was all about. This is from Venice, which is kind of out of the way, and this is more Gothic than it is Renaissance. Another Alberti, again, gone are all of the sculptures. What we have here, mathematical propositions. Again, the shape of the cross, what it looks like on the inside. So that is the Renaissance, which leads to this. Make sure I got the right share. There we are. And there we are. Good. Got a question. If I were to ask this question as a pop quiz question, what was the overriding basic principles that govern Italian Renaissance art?
It had to be as realistic as possible.
Realism. That's really the overall thing from both Renaissance in Italy and in Northern Europe. It was a revival of those skills of making things look, quote, photographic or real. Any other governing ideals, principles?
Let's say like symbolism. Most of their paintings and everything had some sort of symbolism to them.
Yes, and symbolism does what? It helps you tell a story. Sometimes we have to use symbols to kind of get at some ideas that are a little bit more than what we can actually describe simply. And so there's a lot of metaphor and a lot of other kinds of things going on, both in the North and the South. I would go with that. How about science? Mathematics, all through the Italian Renaissance. We have technology in the Northern Renaissance, the Van Eycks, the David Hockney film, all of that kind of stuff. That was all centered in the northern countries in Europe, camera obscura, and so on. And would you say the church plays a big influence on what these artists do? Yes, 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 and no, because what we see here is not only the church still has a lot of authority on what subjects, what artists do in terms of paying them, buying them, sponsoring them, still an important patron, but we see the emergence of ordinary people, lay people, getting their portraits painted, in religious art. Here, I paid for this, you gotta put me in this, whether it's the Holy Trinity by Masaccio or the Marode altarpiece in Northern Europe. And so all of those things would be motivating, guiding factors, principles. And we'll see some of that change, some of that refined when we look at the art in chapter 22, which is called the High Renaissance. It's the 16th century, and it includes Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, Michelangelo, and the chapter after that, we'll see the Northern High Renaissance and a guy named Albrecht Dürer. And so. Is this good stopping? Good. Well, I'll see you on Wednesday then. And be sure to check Canvas. The quiz will be on assignments. The assignments page. And so. So you guys at home got all this? Randus, Julia, Natalie, we good?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'll take that as a yes. Oh.
Have a good one.
All right, you too, Wes. Let's see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.